Is that why we have
Interlinking.
this pet rock here? Because I'm very confused. I mean, I can see why your releases are selling out. Everyone wants to get the Happy Meal toy and find out what the next one's going to be. I mean,
It's
it's
a great
great. You
reference,
guys are
actually.
Holy
geniuses,
cow.
absolute geniuses.
That's actually brilliant.
Hey, welcome to Sipper Social Club. I'm Jeremy.
This is Whisky in the Six. I'm Rob.
Welcome to the Whiskey Rant podcast.
It's a little crusty,
It's frustrating.
and it's going to be a little bit of a rant.
I don't understand it. I don't know why.
Some sort of injustice.
Anyway, end rant.
Hello and welcome back to the Whiskey Rant podcast. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Rob.
And tonight we are joined by a special guest, Sons of Vancouver, another up-and-coming Canadian distillery. Thanks so much for joining us. Why don't you guys just quickly introduce yourselves and what you do at the distillery?
I'm James. I am the janitor and professional emailer.
I'm Max. I have some involvement in making the liquid.
I'm Jenna. I oversee the whiskey program here at Sons of Vancouver.
Nice.
I almost said Sons of Anarchy. I was so close
Sons
to
of
saying it. I
Anarchy.
was so
Yeah,
close to
I've probably almost said that like 10 times.
Never heard of it.
So a lot of buzz about your whiskeys. There's a friend of ours that's starting an independent bottler that honestly wants to like kind of create that same kind of buzz, like, and he used you guys as like a model, I should say, or an example, because he's just in love with how you guys have presented yourselves and what you've been putting out. So why don't you kind of how many releases have you done so far, and what's the inspiration? You guys are, am I right in saying that it's been mostly rye, if not all rye?
Yeah, mostly.
Okay.
There's been a couple that have had like some single malt thrown into them, but
Even like our lowest rye blend was like 80% rye. Yeah.
Okay. So like by American standards, it would be a straight rye pretty much every single release.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And so we have in front of us here Rolling Hills in the Morning Mist. Really cool bottle, like design. Like, let's start with how this started. How about we start there? How did Sons of Vancouver start?
I opened the distillery 10 years ago. I have a background in bartending, and I have a pretty technical background in like process control and automation. And I've been brewing beer. I've been brewing beer sort of around like 2010, back before craft breweries were a thing. You'd go to like these brew pubs that had like styles of beer people drank 100 years ago that were like super malty, and you could kind of see where like the beer industry was going. I've always been a whiskey guy, and around 2011, 2012, I got a job at a bourbon distillery in the States, and I worked down there for about a year. And then I'd been living in Vancouver at the time, and then kind of came back up here and set down the road of opening a craft distillery in Vancouver. And a lot of things like came up for us. The distillery that I'd been working at, they were selling their equipment around the time that we were opening, so we were able to get that. I had experience running it, so that was a huge benefit. We didn't have like the same learning curve that a lot of people had when they were first opening, and more so the laws in Canada and in British Columbia really like started to favor small producers. I remember like when we opened, I'd gone to trade school in Edmonton, and at the time, if you wanted to open a distillery in Edmonton, you had to have a minimum annual production of 750,000 liters a year.
Wow.
So to like put that in perspective, you had to produce like 4,500 barrels of whiskey a year to be like, to even like get a license.
That's crazy.
It was wild. Yeah. And we ran as making a lot of the clear spirits, vodka and amaretto early on. First year in production, we put away 1 barrel of whiskey. Our second year in production, we put away 2 barrels of whiskey. I think you can see where this is going.
Yeah.
But in 2019, we put 25 away.
Nice.
And like our production's like really climbed. So now we spend about 10 months of the year making whiskey, and we spend 2 months of the year keeping the lights on with the amaretto. And more so, especially this year, you're going to see that little switch happen. And right now, we're in the midst of becoming a whiskey distillery, and our other products will fade into the background.
So Jeremy laughs every time I bring anything that has to do with Italian culture up.
I was gonna
but-
say, oh, you're gonna love that Amber.
is the Italian inspiration coming from Jenna, or is that just your bartending background? You liked that?
I like that you knew that I was Italian.
Come on. It's like that. It's like that Spidey sense. Like when two
Yeah.
Spider-Men see each other, they're like, they point at each other. They know. You just know.
Talent
We
recognizes
just entered
talent,
the
yeah.
Spider-Verse.
No, I came on. I came out here in 2017 to learn how to distill. That's when I met James and Richard, and I didn't join the team until 2021. So they were well into amaretto production by that time.
Mm.
But my Nona does love that I make amaretto.
Nice. Love that.
Yeah.
So is that what I know that there was
You had a release that you aged in a barrel, right? In an amaretto.
in an amaretto, and it was like Nunna's liquor cabinet or Nunna's.
That one was in a Morrow barrel, yeah. So that was like the distillery across the lane from us is the Woods Spirit Co. And they make Italian liqueurs almost exclusively. And
Oh,
so they gave us an Amaro barrel, and we aged a rye in it. And so it came out like pretty like bitter gentian, sort of like orangey, and then we blended it out to be like a little bit more approachable. But yeah, it tasted very similar to a Boulevardier almost.
Oh, okay, cool.
And so we were trying to figure out how to brand it and like figure out how to sell it because it's sort of like out of left field. And so we realized we should just pair it with like Negroni Week, and then people will sort of be expecting that profile and it'll make more sense. And then yeah, we kicked around like a lot of names for that one, and eventually I was like, it really just like it makes me think of like being in my Nona's basement, and like she's got like bottles of like Chinar and like this like red stuff she uses for cakes and stuff. And so I kicked out like raiding Nona's liquor cabinet, and everyone loved it. So that one was my influence, and yeah, I wrote like a letter that went with it and talked a bit about like my Nona and stuff, and that she would tell you to stop spending your money on whiskey and save for a house instead.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the branding, because like you guys do name all of your releases. You come up with clever names, because why should SMWS have all the fun?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, what's the inspiration? Like, how do you guys come up with the names? Is it just, it just comes to you? This obviously is Rolling Hills in the Morning Mist. This is the Isla finished rye. Says Northern Isla. We were thinking maybe, I don't know, what, Brooklady,
Bunahabe, maybe.
Kalila.
We felt like it was like Kalila, or like we sort of like pointed towards Northern Isla because we were worried that people would buy it and expect like a peat bomb.
Oh, okay.
It's really not that. It comes out almost as granite, or like a mossiness, or like a
I feel a lot of salinity.
yeah, more of like a
Yeah.
minerality and salinity.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, we wanted a name that like sort of alluded to Scotland without saying it. The rock obviously alludes to the tasting note of licking a wet rock on the back of
Yeah.
the bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that why we
Into
have this
licking.
pet rock here? Because I'm very confused of why
His
this
name is
came.
Jeff.
His name is Jeff.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jeff. Do you guys have a piece of this company? What is going on with this? Why is there a pet rock on our table right now? I'm
No.
very confused.
One of our like shticks that we think sets us apart is that like every time we send out a mailer to people with their whiskey, we'll include something that has to do with like the tasting notes in it. For
Our first release was cigarettes on a leather jacket, and you got like a piece of leather with half a pack
Oh,
of
cool.
cigarettes.
Okay.
yeah, we did like marshmallows over a campfire, and we sent like a little like s'mores kit.
That's cool.
Very nice.
Yeah, we try to just like have fun with what we're doing. We always like try to embody like just because it's good whiskey and it like you drink it with your pinky out doesn't mean you can't like, have some like fun and like it doesn't need to be pretentious.
I love that. I
Really
love
good.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you guys, it seems like your personality kind of comes through
Absolutely.
in these expressions, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I personally find like the naming convention to be like almost like the most challenging part because there's like the three of us is involved in everyone and our senses are completely different. And so well, not completely, but we all like gravitate to like a different part of the blend, whether when it first hits your tongue or like middle of the palate or the finish. And naming it and getting something that like resonates with everyone is so much of the battle.
Well, and then once you name it, you have to come up with like, okay, what are we sending along with it?
Oh,
And
yes.
sometimes that's a bit of like a stumper too. Yeah, we
Yeah,
have these
with-
like drawn out conversations and arguments about what to name our whiskey sometimes.
Yeah, we
I
usually
can see how that.
put together our tasting notes and then try to think of it like where those tasting notes take us as a narrative. Like Matt, like I like to always think that it's not like we're trying to take you on more than just a sensory, like a taste and smell thing. We're trying to take you to a place or take you to a feeling as well with the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I got that vibe out after the first one that it was I can't remember the name of it. Obviously, you guys will remember as soon as the pineapple something.
Yeah.
Using the tropical breeze.
Yeah, we sent you like I think it was the award winner.
Yes. Yeah.
Number 3. Yeah.
Unreal. Yeah. Definitely
have any
very
of that
tropical.
left?
What's that?
Do you have any left?
We crushed that.
Yeah.
We crushed that one.
Awesome.
I mean, I can see why your releases are selling out. Everyone wants to get the Happy Meal toy and find out what the next one is going to be. I mean,
It's
it's
a great
great.
reference.
You guys are
actually.
Holy
geniuses.
cow.
Absolute geniuses.
That's actually brilliant. It's appealing to all the people that used to collect Happy Meal toys, myself included.
This rye is fantastic. A lot of times I've had stuff that's been aged in, an Isla barrel and it doesn't necessarily always balance. This seems perfect. And is this a blend? Have you blended this with a little bit of malt as well?
No, this one's 100%.
100% rye.
100% right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one before this one had some malt in it. I think that was the highest malt bill that we'd ever done.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah. Is
yeah.
that a trend that you're kind of seeing in Canadian production of ryes where they are blending a little bit of malt in to give it maybe some more character, viscosity, that kind of thing? Is that something you're planning on doing more of?
I think for us, we have a pretty different rye than most places that have tried in terms of like our fermentation and like house style that we've created. We end up with like some very like fruity tropical notes that come out naturally. We use a French saison yeast, so like banana, clove, is sort of the direction that it tends to head in. Sometimes you get these like bubblegum notes. So like we don't really struggle with like the mouthfeel or the body or anything like that. So if we do blend it with single malt, it's usually because we're just looking for a different flavor profile to incorporate in there. But I mean, as you can taste in this one, like I found that I've served this to a few people sort of blind and said, like, what do you think about it? And like they wanted to say that there was single malt in it. The barrel had a tremendous influence on it. And we got a lot of the same like sort of earthy feelings that you get from a nice scotch. So yeah, the blending is like, yeah, if we're looking for a certain thing that's missing or we're looking for something that like maybe there's some like very like grainy notes that are missing or some like
Sometimes it's just the finish. Like sometimes with the
Yeah.
finish, like you've got great front palate, great mid palate, and then it just kind of drops off really quickly. And that's really where like blending comes in. And
Yeah.
it might not be a ton. Sometimes it's only like 5%. and that's all it's needed of like just a really good punchy whiskey, or even like something with a lot of like oak backbone, and you can carry the rest of the whiskey with that.
Yeah, the odd time we'll get some barrels that are spicy,
Yeah.
that sort of like rye spice character, and then maybe you're looking for something that's a bit sweeter to balance it out. But yeah, our rye tends to be like pretty sweet on its own.
Yeah, very,
we're,
very
we're
like tropical kind of like fruity flavors I get out of it. What's the like yield on one release? Like what like is it always you guys always kind of go for the same amount of bottles released, or is it different every single time?
it's largely been what's ready. Like
Yeah.
we're pretty small, and our whiskey program was very small. And we, as James talked about, like in 2019 we put away 20-25 barrels. In 2021 we put away just shy of 75 barrels, I think.
Mm.
We really kicked it into high gear in 2021, and we're now coming up on a lot of that starting to mature. So
Actually, I'd like to say like the size of the release is really only dictated by the amount of the smallest quantity of any portion of the blend. So like, when you think about blending, like you think about blending a lot of whiskey, you think about blending like 75 barrels. And you're gonna blend in like, let's say you're gonna blend a 100-barrel batch, and you're gonna blend in 5 barrels, like 5 whole barrels to, adjust the whiskey 5% in any direction. On our scale, we're dealing with such small quantities. We're taking a barrel and we're slicing it into pieces.
That makes sense.
And like, there are certain elements that we have way too much of, and there are certain elements that, like, by God, I wish I had so much more. And it's those ones that really dictate the size of the batch.
yeah, so like soon we'll be having a lot more that matures, and we'll be able to increase our batch size. But there's a lot, like when you learn about blending, like there are sort of numbers that you hit with barrels that it starts to take away from the blend. Like the magic number is kind of around like 20 to 25 barrels, where things start to sort of blend together in a way that you start to lose a bit of the characteristic, you start to lose a bit of those like special notes about a barrel. And then when you get into like 75, 150, you're getting into like thousands, like it becomes just one big part of a whole, and it's very homogenous. So for us, like it's a plus that we're able to blend in small amounts, because we can really take a barrel, figure out what's special about that barrel, and then try to amplify it with adding other things to it, rather than just sort of like throwing shit together and seeing how it comes out.
Makes sense.
But yeah,
I always like to think about how like single barrel releases are like all the rage right now. But like, what if you could take a great single barrel and you could just blend like 15 or 20% more volume into that, like really strategically? There's no reason that shouldn't be like
Yeah.
phenomenal.
that's
Sure.
essentially what sort of these, like this whiskey and the ones that we've released past have been. That we have, a couple barrels that mature, we feel like they're ready to go, and then we sort of say, okay, those two together forming the base, where do we want to head, like what direction are we heading in with it? And in the future it might end up being like that the bulk of the barrels end up being our main SKUs, and that barrels that we find like have a special characteristic or have a flavor that's really dominating, that we make those into our special releases. We're at a like interesting time where our whiskey program is young, and so we have a lot of blank space to sort of figure out what we want it to look like, and a lot of it is iterative. It's sort of like Palm Trees won, and so it took the big award, people wanted it so bad, so every time we put it out it sells out. It will probably make it every year, and maybe that'll become our first SKU or something like that. So we're sort
That's
of
cool.
just like seeing where it goes.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, as far as the palm trees go, I guess you guys have like specific styles. Like, are you marking each of your barrels like this is like pineapple dominant. This is like I don't know. Like, is that kind of what everybody?
Yeah, I would say like especially now when me and Max are putting down barrels, a lot of times we blend out like when you put your distillate together and you bring it down to proof. Um, for us, a lot of times it's a few batches that are getting blended together, and sometimes you just have that batch that's like really singing, and for whatever reason, the temperature was good, the humidity was good. Sometimes you can't really tell why. Um, every so often, me and Mac will like remark to ourselves like, "This one's so banana-y," and I'll usually mark that down in our barrel spreadsheet, like future palm trees question mark, and then just make
Nice.
myself a note for the future. Um, Palm Trees was 100% rye in an ex bourbon barrel. It'll continue to be that as far as we've decided. And then, you know, we've started to play around with like different barrel origins for the rum finish. The first time it was Virgin Islands. The next time it was Barbados. We're looking at maybe some agricole barrels this year. So
We're talking to your boy Phil. He's gonna try and get us a 4 square barrel.
yeah.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, we're kind of just letting it sort of go where it wants to go with you know intention of just making whiskey that we think is good, that we want to see on the market, that we like to drink.
I was just looking at the ABV of this because I was just assuming it was 46. It's 59.9.
It's
Ah.
and the drink
Drinks not even close to that.
The only way you would be able to tell is the viscosity. It's like
That's
super oily and
wild, yeah.
great viscosity, but yeah, there's no heat. Like
We've been talking to Canadian whiskey producers who are bottling whiskey at a fairly young age. One common thing that they said is they're cutting very like narrow as far as like heads, tails, hearts are concerned. Where do you guys kind of land on that? Are you kind of like hitting a lot of the hearts? Does it lend itself to being able to bottle whiskey at a younger age when you do that, or what's your experience?
We came into it like really with the intention of making a whiskey that could be put into a bottle at 3 years.
Yes.
Not to say that every whiskey will, or that we won't let it go longer, but we knew what we wanted to accomplish, and that was like we need to have whiskey out in 3 years, both for like financial and stylistically.
yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, we run a column still. So like we need to make both neutral and whiskey with our stills. So we run it differently depending on what we're making. But we're not running a pot still, and that's really intentional because I think a lot of the mistake that's often made is like running a pot still whiskey and expecting it to be done in 3 years is pretty unrealistic. Like those compounds need to have time to change and to grow and to, you know, to evaporate and to like become what most whiskeys are. And so like there's a reason why Scotland mostly releases 7 to 10 year whiskeys,
Right.
you know, earliest. Like yeah, there are ones that are younger, but you know, they're maybe blending it out differently or maybe running it off differently. The pot still whiskeys are staying in the barrel for 7 years, sometimes 20 years. Like
Yeah.
yeah, it needs the time to do that. So we tend to run our column really hot, so like our cooling water comes from like a big tote that we have like the top cut out of, and we'll let it actually like get hot. So it's not like, you know, 40 degrees, which is still cool enough to condense the spirit, but allows a lot more of the flavor compounds through the deflag. It's getting very nerdy and technical,
Wow,
but
that's awesome.
yeah, like it took us some time to really like dial in that process, and like now it's great. We know exactly what we're looking for. And yeah, we can get a lot of those like tropical notes off of it, and that super banana-iness.
And just through the way that we blend and blend so like meticulously, you don't have to have a full barrel that has all that character. You can just blend in like 1 or 2% and get as much as you need.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So the column versus the pot, is the column, the neck is longer if I'm not mistaken? Is that why? So it's like basically it's
You've got refraction going on. So you have separation of your heads, hearts, and tails happening in the column before you're drying off any of the liquid. And it's generally caused by a combination of like the plates inside of it and then also cold water stopping the distillate from coming out too quickly. Whereas like a pot still, all of your refraction is coming from the ambient air around the helmet. So that's why they talk about like neck angle and neck size.
The longest necks in
Yeah,
Scotland.
the size of the bell at the top or onion or whatever. All of that matters to determine how much refraction is happening in your pot still. But there's still like there's never as much separation as a column still. Like we can run neutral off of our column still. That's very characterless. But we can also run really flavorful whiskey, so you can really like change the way you're running it for that purpose.
The way that I've always looked at it is that this, in a pot still or a column still, the same things go in and the same things come out. You just have way better control over them in one scenario.
okay.
And that's the one we choose to use.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, like in Scotland, like you hear people talk about like, some guy ran the forklift into the still and made a big dent in it, and then the next time they set up a still, they design it so it has that dent in it because they're worried that otherwise their whiskey won't taste the same. People have like you talk to 10 distillers, they're all going to tell you something different. We all have our opinions and stuff, but it works for us. We ferment our whiskey a different way than most places do in that we give it like a long rest period. So if you're looking at like bourbon, a lot of places their fermentation is like 48 to 72 hours. So like 3 days and they're moving it over and distilling it off, whereas we often will let it go like a week to a week and a half sometimes, and that rest period really allows flavor development. And so the flavor development from the French Saison yeast is really what brings about that like banana-y clove, and amplifies like the natural rye character.
A lot of
After
people.
we won the Whiskey Award, I tried to push these guys to double production. And we did 1 month of production, 1 month of double production, and we just lost all of that character.
Yeah, we
Really?
we
All that
operate on
fruit.
we operate on like a 2-week schedule right now, and we bumped it to 1 week, and so we went to like a 3-day ferment, and there was so much of it that we lost from it that I was just like, this would be great for neutral production to speed that up to give us more time to be able to make whiskey throughout the year, but for whiskey it's cutting into the quality, so we decided to not do that.
One
Yeah.
thing about your production that you might not have an issue with sourcing is grain. I know but a lot of people talk about how Canada is like amazing for rye. Where are you guys sourcing your rye from? Is it from British Columbia? Are you from other provinces as well? Whereabouts?
Yeah, so you're not wrong to think that. But in British Columbia, when I spoke earlier about some of the laws changing in our favor, one of those laws was that there are a lot of tax advantages for us if we use British Columbia grain.
Okay.
But the problem that's created only in the last year is that rye is so cheap in Alberta, there's no reason for growers to grow it in British Columbia. And so we were actually like we've just contracted a farmer to like get his entire crop, to grow an entire crop of rye solely for us.
Okay.
Nice.
And, we're in a real big pinch right now, but that crop will be ready basically this time next year. So as long as we can make it through the rest of the year, we'll be fine.
Yeah, all BC distillers basically get their grain from like 3 different places, and it's crazy because like there's not many markets that are like that not by choice, I guess. Like there's a lot of places that like source their grain for like terroir or whatever, but like for us it's just you have to, otherwise you don't get that tax break. And it has not always been easy to follow those rules, but there's no exceptions to it. So
Makes sense.
So if rye is mostly coming from Alberta, what about other grains? Does BC have an advantage growing anything else, or is it just mostly you're just sourcing from other provinces?
I don't think so. I don't actually think that BC has great growing conditions for
Yeah.
a lot of grains. I mean, don't quote me on that because I'm not an expert, but like I know they grow like potatoes and corn, but I don't think they're the right types for distilling necessarily.
We have like two grain regions basically. We have like northern British Columbia, which is in the Peace region. So you have like this doesn't mean anything to people in Ontario. You have the Peace Valley up there, which is like it's similar to like Niagara on the Lake. It's a really great cropland, but it's in northern BC, so it's really fucking cold, and the season is like only for grain. There's no fruit.
Right.
And then the other one we have is bordering on Alberta, so we do have like we get some of the prairie like weather patterns, and that's another one. Otherwise, like we're basically just forestry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you would assume the closer to the coast, the worse it would be to grow grain. And you're right, probably like on the eastern side of BC would probably be the best.
I'm betting there's probably land that's great here for it, but like land is so expensive that it's like now I think like the places where it's cheapest to own land is where things are farmed.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
Also,
Yeah.
in terms of like agricultural value, like on a list of agricultural, like grain is like number 60 at the bottom of the list. Like
yeah.
you're
Yeah.
gonna grow blueberries and cranberries like well before you dedicate your crop to.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can grow things here like kiwis and like
Yeah.
sugarcane and stuff,
Agave.
but no one grows that. They just grow the things that sell the most in Canada. It would actually be very cool if someone started like a sugarcane farm or like a banana farm or something and like started
Be
making
the
beer
first
out
to
of
do a
that.
BC tequila.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Agave.
We heard of a distillery on the island that was claiming to like start growing their own sugarcane so that they could make local rum, because
Rum.
the two things you can't make here are rum and tequila because we don't have the ability to grow that here.
Right.
So yeah, if anyone did do that, they would clean up.
Yeah,
Huh.
that's true.
Be very interesting.
It would be. I'm surprised that there's not more Canadian distilleries getting into making like brandy, or like, well, to try to replicate like a cognac style brandy, because we have grapes growing across Canada, but nobody does it.
Yeah, I've been on this hill for a while of like I don't know why no one does that. Why no one is taking there's so many lots of grapes that you can go on websites and it's just for people to list their grapes, and they're like grapes that for whatever reason are not great for making wine, but they're great for making alcohol. And if you just applied a barrel program similar to whiskey to that distillate, I think you'd have something there. I've
Yeah.
always said that we should start another company where we get into that, but I don't know that the market's there.
Yeah, that's the I guess the drawback is that we don't know if there's enough people. As Italians, we probably grew up with like our grandparents all drank brandy, and that was like the thing to drink. So maybe that's why we go to there when
Yeah.
we're thinking grapes. But I don't know. I always found that interesting. We live, an hour and a bit away from Niagara, and there's a lot of distilleries popping up, and nobody's doing brandy.
I don't know. Maybe it's a hard market to break into. So much established stuff already.
You mean like the single malt
Yeah.
one where there's
Yeah. Oh yeah, whiskey's way easier. Totally.
Honestly, I love the way you guys present your bottle. Very like, and what's cool about it is that, in my head, the way I see it is like I always rip on like BTAC because they claim to be this like super rare thing that like they're not super rare. They're producing like 45,000 bottles of something a year or whatever it is. Um, it has like a kind of BTAC bottle look to it,
Yeah,
and
you're right.
the rye, in my opinion, competes with like the BTAC rye, which
There
is
you
the
go.
Thomas H. Handy.
Yeah.
If not beats it up a little bit, in my opinion. So I think it's gonna be cool when some Americans get their hands on this stuff because they're gonna be like, "What the hell is happening?" Like, what?
Mention their catchphrase on the back of the label.
Oh, yeah. So is this the catchphrase on all the backs? I didn't notice it on the first
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
So the whiskey you want your good friends to drink when you're dead.
Right. So these are the so you guys have like taken this to your family and be like, drink this when I'm in a casket, or
We
like,
have
what's the
bottles,
inspiration for that quote?
It's in my will.
Both of
Yeah.
my grandfathers have requested that this be served at their funerals.
Okay.
It's a dark, but sure.
That's
But
awesome.
we told them it was sold out.
Yeah. Gotta keep living. Another year.
It's the idea that that you look back on past events in your life and you remember them fondly, but you might not remember what you drank at that time. And whether your best friend's getting married or your grandfather passed away, it's our job as a producer to create a bottle that facilitates those memories before they've ever taken place. And so, I know when I get together with an old friend from college that I haven't seen in a long time, I walk into a liquor store or I walk into like the distillery and I look for a bottle that we have that's perfect for that moment. And we're making, we make small quantities of really good whiskey. We're trying to facilitate times like that.
I love that concept.
Yeah,
That's
I love
cool.
that too.
That's really cool.
Sons of Vancouver, you guys are all products of the province. Is this where the name came from?
Jenna's from Manitoba.
Yeah, I'm from Winnipeg, actually.
Uh, it's a name that travels well. Embarrassingly, the Mumford and Sons hadn't come out yet at the time, or that other motorcycle show. And one day you just got to pick a name.
Yeah.
The name that travels pretty well. People like
Yeah.
Vancouver.
No, I like
I
that.
like Toronto.
Now look, those jerks from Toronto.
Well, I like the vibe. You guys got a good thing going, I think.
I
with
think so
this.
too.
And I guess keep the batches small. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I mean,
we
that's
want
kind of-
want more at the same time, but yeah.
yeah, we want to be able to buy some, but
Yeah,
make
they might
sure.
grow a little bit, but we won't do anything that sacrifices quality. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess what would be the next steps? Like you've kind of flirted with the idea of amping up production and maybe that wasn't the right route because you had to speed up things that maybe are better kept slow. So what's the next step? Like do you go with another fermenter? Do you go with another, and I know these things all cost big money, right? So
Just never sleep and just stay 24/7, 365.
Well, like the first thing we've done is we really scaled back. This started a few years ago. Like we've scaled back on, on the clear spirits that we made to dedicate about 80% of our time to whiskey production.
yeah, it
And-
used to be like 50-50, and now
Yeah.
we're like 80-20.
Okay.
Really, like by the end of this year, you're gonna see that kick into the consumer. Like you're gonna see that whiskey coming out in bottles. First of all, there's gonna be like a mainstay SKU. I can't really say like what the concept of it's gonna be at this point, but the plans to have a 100% rye at cask strength come out. That's always available. And
The
and
whiskey
our-
lovers whiskey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the other one would be a weeded rye. So like the BTACs, I'm a really big fan of weeded whiskey. They're sippable, they're approachable. And they also haven't really been done in Canada, and there certainly hasn't been like a weeded rye available in Canada.
Okay,
so
cool.
That would be another one.
I want that one to be like the whiskey that convinces you that you like whiskey. If you're
Mhm.
like, I'm not a whiskey drinker, and you have that one, and it it brings you over to
Oh,
the.
shoot,
Yeah.
do you want
Does
to
that
talk
fit
about
here? The whiskey
that?
that I think that would.
Yeah, I think that'd be okay.
I mean, I was thinking for like your mainstay skew. My kids have a pretty good idea for the pet rock Jeff, maybe just Jeff. Just Jeff for the mainstay
Yeah.
skew.
Perfect.
Yeah,
We'll
I think that's
we'll
good.
send it up the flagpole to the CEOs at the top.
Yeah,
I
I
thought you were
mean,
going to say
you
we're
work-
going to send it
you
to
can
their
workshop
kids.
I mean, it sells itself.
Very cool. So your next release, what are we expecting for that?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Let's talk about other stuff.
You know, this is one of the first times that I haven't like had a like quick answer for that. We have a few irons in the fire.
Okay.
You want to talk about Realms?
Yeah. So a big project that we are working on right now is so we talk a lot about like, you know, what corn is to bourbon, what single malt is to Scotch. We really want rye to be to Canada, and it is in the sense that it's a name that we use to call whiskey.
Yeah.
But I think the consumer largely doesn't really know that, you know, the bulk of the whiskey that you're drinking on the commercial market is actually corn.
Yeah.
And that we have these weird whiskey laws that sort of like allow you to call anything rye. And
And also like the rye that we do have is like Canada's like the fucking second biggest country in the world, and the rye is exactly the same
Yeah.
across the entire country.
Yeah, which is
Um,
great. Yeah.
so we really wanted to like, you know, this sort of came out of that our house style developed into this thing that was like the opposite of what people thought rye should be. That we came out with this rye that was like super tropical and sweet and accessible, and that people were like, well, what is this? Like, this is the opposite of the rye that I've drank in the past. And we really wanted to like show people that there is a spectrum of flavor that you can get from rye that we see all the time coming off our still, that we taste our barrels and we're like, oh, this one tastes like blackberry or this one tastes like bubblegum. And so we came up with this idea of that we're calling Realms of Rye. And we're going to come out with a series that's really special edition, that's like really limited, and it's going to be like just a few, you know, one or two barrels that's blended out to really taste like a specific flavor profile. And so like we have a few barrels that are earmarked for this project that we're going to like really amplify specific flavor areas of the whiskey wheel. And so the first one is going to be coming out like in the next few months. You know, it's not going to be any more limited than the stuff that we've come out with is, you know, in the past, but it's going to be, you know, a little bit more special, a little bit more high end, and yeah, we're really
When Jenna was like pitching the Realms of Rye idea to the three of us, like what made me fall in love with it was we're going to explore areas of the flavor wheel that haven't been done with rye before.
Nice.
And that was just like, it was pretty eye opening.
Yeah,
Thought about it in that way.
we really feel like it's an area that hasn't been, it's something that hasn't been accomplished in Canada yet in terms of the whiskey that's out there on the market right now. It's really going in the vein of like, you know, the bourbons and the scotches of the world, that we see these things on those markets, and that we're aware of like the reputation that Canada has in the world market, that like people think it's like, you know, black velvet and like
Yeah.
smooth rye that's super easy drinking and costs like 20
Crown
bucks.
Royal Blackberry.
Canadian mist.
Yeah. And like, yeah, there's that on the market, but like that's not all we have to offer. And so like we really want to have like a showstopper and just say like, here's the quality that you can get out of Canada. And like, yeah, there's so much to rye that I think people aren't aware of. So yeah, the first one, like we just finished the artwork for it and the packaging, and we're moving on to the next step. We had hoped to have it out sooner, but you know how things go. So it'll be out this year for sure. We're gonna probably do 5 or 6 whiskeys in the whole series. We'll hope that people will like want to collect them and like display them on their shelf and stuff and drink them also. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think that's a really cool idea. I almost kind of am scared. Like whenever I hear about stuff like that, I get scared. I get anxiety
He
because
gets scared that he can't get it.
yes,
That's what
I
he's
get scared that I'm never gonna get a bottle, that I'm gonna have to fight my grandmother for one. That like, and these are real things that actually happen in Canada, especially in Ontario because we can't get anything. So it sounds really exciting, but I also have a ton of anxiety with this new idea that you guys have.
Oh, I know how you feel about it. Like if we had more liquid, we would put it out. Like it's not. I think we get a lot of. I can't say we get a lot of flack, but we get some flack from people that are like, why aren't you putting out more? Why can't I get my hands on it? And it's like we just don't have liquid. Like, you win an award and then all of a sudden you're just like shot into the spotlight. And for us, like it's sad that like the bulk of our whiskey just isn't ready yet. And so we're putting it out as fast as we can, basically.
Yeah.
So as much as we want to satisfy everyone, like we just can't right now. And so
Totally.
one day we'll get there slowly. But yeah, so like it'll be somewhere in the realm of like probably 250 to 300 bottles per release, maybe a bit more. That's about what we've been doing. Some of our releases have been a little smaller than that, but that's about what we've been doing. So we're not going to make it any harder to get, but it will be very special and it will be delicious.
For the people who think they're gonna like see it on a liquor store shelf and pick it up, that might not be a reality right away. But honestly, if you sign up to our mailing list on our website, and when it goes on sale, like within 5 minutes, you buy a bottle, you're gonna get a bottle.
Yeah.
But like, it's not gonna be there by the end of the day.
Yeah.
For that one that sold out in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Except for
There was a bit of craziness when we first won the big award. Like we
pent-up demand.
We won the award in like in January 2023, and then like February we put our next whiskey on sale, and that one sold out in like 2 minutes flat, which
Yeah, that's crazy.
baffled even us. And now we're at the point where like things sell out in a day, but it's not like you can't get your hands on them if you set your alarm and go on to buy them. Like
Yeah.
you can get a bottle.
I mean, that's such a good problem to have for like you guys are definitely in the minority, I would say. Because there's a lot of distilleries out there that are, I don't want to say struggling, but the reality is that they are, right? And the fact that you guys can put out a release and within that day, the entire thing is purchased, like that's got to be such a good weight off your shoulders and great feeling. Like kudos to you guys because like I said, there's a lot of distilleries we've talked to that are trying to do the same thing and just simply can't. I think my like interpretation of what's happening there is you're taking something that a lot of Canadians hold dear to their heart, which is rye, like 100% rye. They love it. I know, especially a lot of like the older gentlemen in Ontario that I like talk to through Whiskey in the Six and whatnot, they're obsessed with rye and they don't have access to really quality rye. So I'm sure that's a sentiment shared across Canada. So I mean, I think that's, and especially being in BC, I can't think of other than your neighbors, to the east. There's not too many BC distilleries that are just focusing on rye, I don't think.
True.
Right? They're mostly single malt for like I mean, as far like of the ones that we've spoken to, we know of, I'm thinking Shelter Point, I'm thinking Macalones,
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
right? Okanagan.
We have a couple peers in the industry that are also doing it, but I don't know that it's exclusive either.
When we opened, like we were only rye, which is like as I'm sure like a bitch to deal with. And that was just our thing from the start. And you see it more now, like people are kind of siloing themselves into rye, I think. Where they kind of started as a craft distillery that has a vodka and a gin and a single malt and a rye. Now they're like just moving to one. And there's like there's a lot of good whiskey coming out of BC right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but I think being rye focused definitely sets you apart from like the big hitters in BC, right?
Yeah,
Because
I don't think that was like necessarily intentional. Like to
I'll
be
promise you
really
from the start it was intentional.
Wait, what?
It
Intentional?
was totally intentional.
Really?
If you think back, like, okay, so like Alberta Premium had been winning like Canadian Whiskey of the Year in like, I'm just gonna pick some numbers, but like 2007, 2008, 2009, the regular Alberta Premium won Canadian Whiskey of the Year. And then Booker's Rye in like 2013 won, and then in like 2015, it was Alberta Premium, or it was Northern Harvest won.
Northern Harvest,
Like,
that's right. Yeah.
like you could totally see it happening, and everyone else is making single malt.
I will say though, we have no ability to make single malt in our distillery, so like intentional, but also necessary. I mean, we could if we wanted to really like reset up our distillery to like do single malt, but I think all of our hearts lie in rye. Also, like we love rye, whether it's American or Canadian or whatever. Like whenever we go, like we just went to Kentucky last week and did a week of like going to distilleries and learning about bourbon and stuff. And every distillery that we went to, we were like, "Oh, but they have a rye."
I bought only rye.
Yeah, we went with a bunch of bourbon, but also a bunch of rye. So, yeah, that's just like we love drinking rye. So, yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
think, like we talked about, like the Canadian consumer has their opinions about like Scotch whiskey and American whiskey and Canadian whiskey, and like giving people something to be proud of, like you said. And you know, like if you want to charge the same amount of money to buy a bottle of single malt as you would a bottle of Scotch, then people are probably going to buy that Scotch because they have the pedigree and the quality. And what we want to focus on is giving that pedigree to Canadian rye whiskey.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I find that on the east and west coast, people are gravitating towards single malt. Maybe something to do with being coastal, but like I'm from Manitoba, rye is the heartbeat of the prairies, and so
Yeah.
like yeah, when I started getting into like whiskey and stuff, that was where I started. Like I didn't really know much about single malt, so yeah, it's always been a love for rye for sure.
Yeah, I think being like raised in Canada, you just have a love for rye automatically. It's one of the first things you start to, try when you're 19.
Right. 19 in quotes. Yeah, rye and ginger, rye and coke.
Right.
I mean, you're right. Like
Yeah.
the rye and ginger and rye and coke are mostly corn whiskey, maybe like a little bit of
Oh,
rye
for
in
sure.
there,
But what's crazy is when I drink a rye, still to this day, I get ginger notes all the time. And it's not because I had a ton of rye and ginger back in the day, but I think that drink was developed because of the idea that in a rye distillate, you get those like gingery kind of
perhaps.
like
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know.
You know, you're honestly not wrong. What you know how grass is like such a big tasting note in rye is really early in the distillation. You get grass, but you get like this wild agricole, like green grass, and that never comes through in like, well, unfortunately, it never comes through in like the final product. But like really early on, and in a few of our releases, we've tried to capture that grassy note, but drive it into the agricole region. So
Yeah,
we've got like rum yeasts and stuff like that.
we did a couple whiskeys that had rum yeast. Was it last year or the year before?
The year before.
Yeah, and we tasted them recently, and I was a bit disappointed with them when they distilled off, and them being in the barrel for a couple years. They're coming out real nice. Like those like
Nice.
agricole notes are back, and
Yeah.
like the sort of estery profile is there.
So for us in a distillation, we'll produce like about 3.5 barrels like per run. And if you blend that all together and you put it in 3 barrels, you have a better chance of coming out with like a consistent product. But if you were to divide it up and you were to put like the first half of the run in 1 barrel, middle of the run in 1 barrel, and the end in another barrel, like you can have 3 wild products.
Mm-hmm.
And those are like you know, you don't want all your products to be like that, but for blending, that's such a valuable tool.
Very cool.
Very cool.
All right, well, we'll put the link if people want to stress themselves out and get on your mailing list and try to refresh web pages over and over and over again. Link in the description down below. That's the best place to buy your product when it comes out. Join the mailing list and the website.
Yeah, totally.
If there's anyone watching this, the best way to get our product is to email you guys, and then you email us.
Yeah.
That's all. You know how many emails we already get like that? You just
Oh, I know.
oh, you guys are drinking that? Where do I get that Springbank 21-year-old? Like, come on, you can get me some of that,
Get that
can't
at the
you?
LCBO? No, we did not buy that at the LCBO. How did you
Okay,
get
so
it?
I feel like I have one question for you guys.
Okay.
So
I was
you're
I was
sitting-
afraid of this. I knew that today was gonna be the day.
Yeah.
When you asked that question and they're like, I don't know if I should answer this question. I'm like, I can't wait till the day where someone does that to us. Go for it. I want to hear this.
You guys are sitting in front of a beautiful whiskey collection there. I want to know for each of you, what's your favorite bottle in that collection and why? Or like not necessarily favorite, but like what's one that like sticks out for you that
Yeah, we'll both have the same answer, I think, on this one. A while ago, we were able to join the Springbank Society, and they do like private bottlings for their members. There's an 8-year-old up there that's a fresh sherry cask that's just blew us away.
Yeah.
We each got a bottle. We've been babying it probably more than any other bottle we've ever babied in our entire life. Where it's like, and we were talking about this on a different podcast about how I would pour guests like a Highland
25-year-old.
Park 30-year-old
Yeah.
over something like that, because that is like staying on my shelf and it's just me that's drinking it. So I would say that is that correct for you as well?
That's
Okay.
definitely up there. I'm trying to think.
Springbank is
I
probably our
finished most of my
favorite.
Springbank 15.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would have to be
have you guys been to the distillery?
No.
No.
I know.
That one's one that they still floor malt. So like
Yeah.
Yes.
apparently it's amazing. I haven't been, but apparently the tour is amazing because you can like go and see like they have this huge like pipe system that moves around like grain that
That's
moves
crazy.
air and stuff. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard someone describe it as like a whiskey museum almost, the way that they continue to do it very old school style.
It's
Yeah.
like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but
Yeah.
just with scotch.
Yeah.
That's how I envision it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
We're all the way over here on the West Coast, and a lot of times we don't get the cool whiskey from across Canada. But is there anything like made in Canada you guys think we should try that isn't Shelter Point?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, you guys are in the best spot, I think, right now in Canada for like the big players.
Oh,
I
you
mean,
flatter 'em.
I'm sure you guys have tried. I know Two Brewers is not from there; they're from the Yukon, but
Oh yeah,
they're great.
Love
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Pretty much every release from Two Brewers has been phenomenal.
yeah, we love Two Brewers. We love.
They're rivaling Scotland. Like they just have
Yeah.
such a good knowledge of their grain and how to
Yeah.
get flavor out of it. They're making some of the best whiskey in Canada for sure.
Yeah, what's crazy about them is they're doing single malts, but their single malts taste so different than anything else in the world, which is crazy because they're using like a lot of brewers like technique to their single malt, which I don't know. I don't want to wax poetic about Two Brewers on a
They also they had the
but-
luxury of having a successful brewery
That's
and
right.
just like sitting on their whiskey till they felt it was ready.
I went to their distillery in like 2015, and they had 7-year-old whiskey was their oldest whiskey, and they'd never done a release.
Yeah.
wow.
You don't hear about that very often in a
No, yeah, I guess when you don't have to because your beer is doing so well, and that's such a good problem to have,
Yeah.
you know.
we've been kicking around the idea of going up there to visit them.
I might be going up there this summer actually.
Really?
Holy
Yeah.
shit!
Oh,
Let's line it up.
We'll line it up. We'll all
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, that'd be so awesome.
Land of the Midnight Sun.
That's yeah,
You
exactly.
golf?
I mean, not well, but I can. But anytime you guys are in the greater Toronto area, we would love to have you sitting here with us. That'd be awesome. So You
Oh,
guys,
we
he's
can't
wide open.
be in Toronto. We're from Vancouver.
It's really dangerous. There's lots of fighting on the subway, right? What's the train called? The BART or
The
something?
TTC. Yeah, no. Next time we're out there, we'll bring you up for sure, and
Crash on your couch.
we'll have some. Yeah,
Yeah,
gonna
absolutely.
come there and
Plenty of
drink
space.
all of your fucking whiskey.
There's a
I need
spring
somebody to
bank
help me.
behind it.
Well, I will say that this bar is a weapon because I've had like people that claim to be big drinkers walk in here and literally have to be carried out. So
It's easy to do. It's easy to get carried away.
Challenge accepted.
yeah, there you go. Perfect.
It's been such a pleasure for us.
Yeah, so
Thank you
cool.
for coming on.
Thanks so much for coming on tonight, guys.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. It's been a
Thanks
pleasure.
for having us. It was a
Thanks so
pleasure.
much.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.